As Matt said, tonight we're continuing through our Lenten series called Deserts. And as we talked about, the desert is more than just a geographical place, right? It's an experience. It's a season where you feel lost or exposed and unsure of the way forward. The desert tends to strip away our comfort and our control, and it forces us to confront things that we'd rather avoid. Lent is a season when we lean into the desert. If you're anything like me, Lent tends to start strong. You've given something up, you've simplified a bit, maybe you even get ambitious and think, I'm going to sit in silence, I'm going to only eat soup, and I'm going to figure out my inner life. But by week 2, let alone week 5, where we're at, you're tired and you just want a donut and a distraction. That's normal. You're not failing Lent. Lent isn't something that you win or fail at. You're probably just waking up to the mental chaos that shows up when things get quiet. Because if we're honest, some of the hardest internal battles don't involve external drama. There's no burning bush, there's no Red Sea parting, there's no dramatic standoff. It's just you alone with your thoughts. You can be in a room full of people, like we all are here tonight, smiling, doing your job, getting through the day, but internally, you're in a full-on battle with fear and shame and anxiety and old memories and intrusive thoughts, and that little narrator that loves to remind you of all the things that are wrong with you. So tonight, we're going there. We're talking about what happens when the battlefield isn't your circumstances, but your mind. And maybe you're here tonight and you don't believe any of this, but even if that's the case, you know what it's like to be hijacked by your own mind, by your own brain. That's all I'm talking about. You don't have to believe in anything supernatural to recognize the daily war in your thought life. So we're going to start with these 2 passages from Paul from the New Testament. You've probably heard them before, but we're going to read them slow to not miss anything. The first is Romans 12:2, very famous passage. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The Message version of the Bible, which we often refer to around here, puts it a bit differently. It says, don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out, able to readily recognize what He wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings out the best of you, develops a well-formed maturity in you. That's the Romans passage for tonight. The second one is building on similar thoughts. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 10, though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. They have divine power to demolish strongholds. We take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Here's part of what that passage tells us. Your mind is spiritual territory. It's not neutral. And if you're not paying attention, something or someone else will move in and start arranging the furniture. You can picture it like a house. Unless you're just incredibly on top of it. Some rooms are clean and tidy. Some are chaotic. Some you keep the door closed on. Maybe you shove some stuff in there that you're not really ready to deal with. In every home that Michaela and I have lived in, there's always been this one closet that we end up calling the closet of lies. And I don't remember exactly why, but I think it's because one of us promised the other that we would never let it get this way. But we have both failed to keep that promise because inevitably we always have a closet that gets so crammed full of stuff that when you open it or try to get anything out of it, stuff just falls out constantly, all the time. You can hear, it doesn't matter what floor you're on, you can hear when someone opens that closet. I don't know if you have a closet or a drawer like that, you dread opening it and you just try to avoid it. It's a closet of lies. Paul's saying God wants access to your whole house. Even that closet of lies with the emotional clutter that you haven't touched since 1999, that's going to all spill out if you even crack the door open. Some of you weren't even born in the 1900s, but you get what I'm saying. I had this moment a few weeks ago when I was standing in line at the pharmacy. Externally, calm. Internally, it was chaos. I had unanswered texts that were buzzing my phone. I had this vague sense of failure from an awkward conversation that I had earlier. I don't know if you've ever had those. Then I had this spiraling shame that came over something relatively small. I pretty gently backed my truck into a car out here in the parking lot when I was trying to leave. It was not a big deal, but I felt really incompetent about it, and I was running through all the worst case scenarios with my insurance in my mind. And in the middle of all that, I realized I need contact solution. I should grab that. And then before I knew it, it was my turn in line, and the pharmacist had to ask me my date of birth like 3 times because I just could not process what she was asking me. My brain was so jumbled. If you had seen me standing in line, you might not have thought much of it. You might have thought I was mad because I have resting Phil face, but I'm not usually mad. You wouldn't have known that I was exhausted just from existing in my own head. And that's the kind of battle I'm talking about. And here's the thing that we don't always realize. Your thoughts are upstream of just about everything. Your thoughts shape your emotions. Your emotions influence your actions. Your actions form your habits. And your habits shape your life. It all starts with our thoughts. So if we don't start noticing what we're thinking, and we'll start living from lies that we never meant to believe in the first place. And they aren't always obvious, but they run in the background. And they sound like your own voice saying, I'm behind, I'm failing, people know I'm fake, everyone's tired of me, my car needs an oil change, can I do anything right? And you wake up to that and you think, cool, here we go again. Thanks for that little pep talk, brain. But you don't have to stay there. You can take every thought captive. You can be transformed by the literal renewing of your mind. And it starts pretty simply just by paying attention to the thought patterns, to the grooves, the trenches, the weird internal scripts that we get caught in. I want to introduce you to a guy named Evagrius Ponticus. These 4th century Greco-Roman names are so tricky, and they've been throwing me for a loop. He was one of the desert fathers and mothers, these early Christian monastics who left the cities and went out into the wilderness to face their inner worlds. Evagrius had been a big deal theologian in his city. He was brilliant, he was respected, but internally he was unraveling. So he moved out to the desert, as one does, not to escape the world, but to confront himself. Evagrius spent his time naming the patterns that get lodged in the human mind. He identified 8 core thought patterns, the precursors to what we now call the 7 deadly sins. And he listed them as gluttony, lust, greed, anger, melancholy, acedia, which is a kind of deep, soul-deep apathy or despair. Today we would call that sloth. Vainglory, a need to be noticed, and pride. Evagrius understood something deeply human about these patterns. He didn't see them as moral failings, but as early warning signs. They were where we get stuck before things go off the rails. Though they'd later be repackaged as the 7 deadly sins, he didn't think of them that way because sin implies full consent and agency. He noticed that these thoughts are often where the breakdown begins. And he wrote, "It is not in our power to determine whether we are disturbed by these thoughts, but it is up to us to decide if they are to linger within us or not, and whether or not they are to stir up our passions." In other words, you might not choose what thoughts arrive in your mind, but you get to choose how long they stay and whether you give them the keys to your inner life or not. He didn't say, as would happen later, shame on you for having these thoughts, do better, try harder. He said, look at your thoughts, name what's there, notice the loops, because these aren't just temptations, they're mental scripts, they're old grooves, you walk them enough times and they become a trench. It's kind of like, it reminds me of this. I'm going to date myself here for a second. For those of you who remember DuckTales, Scrooge McDuck has this room in this mansion. It's called the worry room, where he literally paces in a circle. And as you can see, every time we see the room, the path that he paces is worn in a trench. because he just spends so much time there worrying, pacing, getting caught in loops, and digging deeper and deeper. That's how our thought processes work, too. The more you rehearse those mental scripts, the deeper the grooves, the deeper the trench is dug in your neural pathways. So let's put a modern spin on Evagrius's list just to get clear. Gluttony might be your 11 p.m. scroll and snack that leaves you more empty than full. Lust might be less about images and more about fantasy, the life, the body, the experience you think would finally make you happy. Greed can look like hoarding your time, your energy, your resources, yourself. Anger may not be this explosive thing, but it simmers under your words and your tone and your assumptions with others. Melancholy isn't sinful, but unprocessed sadness turns into despair or bitterness that starts shaping the way you view the world. Sloth isn't laziness. It's that crippling, apathetic, like, why bother, that shows up when you're overwhelmed or numb. Vainglory is that need to be seen and applauded and validated. It's similar to what we talked about last week. It's that unhealthy need for affirmation and approval. Pride is the belief that we've arrived, that we're complete, that we are all we need, which can often show up as the belief that you should be able to handle everything on your own. Which of these trips you up the most these days? For me, sloth's the one that I consistently battle with. Again, it's not laziness. It shows up in questions in my head like, does any of this really matter? And should I even try? Or what's the point? And I don't always recognize it at first. But when I'm overwhelmed, when I feel trapped, that script just starts looping. And that trench starts being worn even deeper. Have you ever noticed how a tiny anxious thought can spiral into a full day of tension? Or how one little comment sticks with you way too long? Or how shame just doesn't say that you did something wrong, it says that there's something wrong with you. Evagrius was mapping all of that out. And what's wild is he was doing this centuries before modern psychology, right? Like, this was ancient cognitive behavioral therapy before that was even a thing. He was diagnosing the mental and emotional habits that shape our souls. He saw naming them as the beginning of freedom. So again, what about you? What's the top 1 or 2 patterns that show up in your head? Not in a shaming way, but in a curious, noticing, oh, I recognize that kind of way. This is desert work. We name it not to snap our fingers and fix it in one night. That's not going to happen. But so that we can see it and stop allowing it to continue to control us unnoticed in the midst of all the noise. Let's just talk for a second about how loud it can be in our heads sometimes. We're often not thinking. We're usually reacting. We're jumping from getting kids dressed and fed to email to doom scrolling to self-criticism to why did I say that weird thing to that person last week, all while trying to remember why we walked into the kitchen. Half the time, we don't even notice how loud it is. The noise just becomes like the background hum of our lives. It's like, I don't know if you've ever experienced this. You're driving somewhere and suddenly in your brain, you've been arguing with someone in your head from like 5 or 10 or 20 years ago. You've rehearsed your whole side perfectly, your comebacks, your facial expressions, their dramatic exit, but they're not even in the car. And they might not even be in your life anymore. And now you're agitated. You missed your turn. You can't remember where you're going. That's noise. That's the internal loop. It drains you while pretending to be productive. Evagrius had a word for these internal loops called logismoi, intrusive inner narratives. Not just random thoughts, those sticky ones, those persuasive ones that hitch a ride on your memories, your fears, your personality quirks. And if you don't notice them, like I said earlier, they start digging trenches in your thought processes. And the really nefarious thing is these logismoi don't stay in your head. Like we talked about, your thoughts are upstream of everything. Your thoughts affect your emotions, which affect your actions. So these logismoi can literally start shaping how you interact with the world, with people, with yourself, digging deeper and deeper trenches. Paul writes, take every thought captive, not because you're bad, but because you're human. And most of us are living with decades of unexamined scripts. Taking a thought captive doesn't mean that you argue with every passing feeling. Sometimes it's as simple as just asking, wait, is that true? Or where did I hear this? Who told me this? One of the most powerful questions that that a friend once asked me that I continue to employ when helping others through these kinds of self-destructive thoughts. Some of you have had me ask you this over and over and over again. Simply confronting those thoughts by asking, who told you that? People don't really care about me. They just like how I make them feel. Who told you that? I'm not good enough to deserve fill in the blank. Who told you that? I'm a terrible parent. Who told you that? God is really disappointed in me. Who told you that? Oftentimes, if we pause to consider it, we can trace that thought back to a false narrative that we've just come to accept as truth. But that process is where renewing our minds begins. That moment of pause is where healing can start. Renewing your mind is like planting new steps on the ground. At first, it's awkward. It's like writing with your non-dominant hand. It doesn't feel like renewal. It feels clumsy. But slowly, that new path becomes familiar, eventually more familiar than the trench, and the old trench starts to fill in. This is spiritual warfare. Like, I know that that's a term that's thrown around a lot, especially in evangelical circles, but this is what it often actually looks like. Not horror movie stuff. It looks like noticing when your mind starts spiraling and saying, yeah, not today. I know who I am, I know who God is, and I'm not giving that voice a megaphone. It looks like refusing to rehearse your shame again. It looks like choosing gratitude when bitterness is the easier route. It looks like praying, God, I want to numb out right now, but instead help me, renew my mind. It doesn't have to always feel like demolishing strongholds like Paul talked about. Sometimes it's simply a sigh and a sentence. God, I'm tired of this story. Please help me tell a different one. And sometimes we miss it, right? Like you don't catch the thought, you spiral, you numb out, you rehearse your shame. And even then, God doesn't meet you there with a lecture. He meets you with grace every time. Sometimes you need help. Sometimes you need someone else to say, hey, that doesn't sound like God. Who told you that? Where did that thought come from? And every time you stand at the edge of that well-worn trench, the one that you've walked 100 times before, and you whispered, not this time. That's resistance. That's transformation. That's spiritual defiance against that old pattern. It's quiet, it's faithful, it's honest, it's repetitive, and it's real. So here's a process for how we can begin to practice this. The first is just notice the trench. What's the recurring thought that you're having? Is it even true, or is it just familiar? Next is name the logismoi. Name the pattern. Name the category. Is it fear? Is it shame? Is it pride? Is it sloth? Is it something else? And think, when did this start showing up in me? What is the earliest that I can think back to when this was a problem? And then replace it with truth. Write down a verse that you find, or the words of a friend that speak the truth to you, that remind you what the truth is. I don't know if you remember from our last series, one of the recurring themes was the words from God, do not be afraid. I have that written down all over my office right now to remind me. I say it out loud when that trench calls my name. You can do the same thing. And then finally, just pray honestly about it. God, this thought feels true even though I know it's not. Help me see the truth. And here's the thing, this doesn't need to feel profoundly spiritual. Like, it may not feel like spiritual work at all sometimes. It won't always work the first time. Sometimes you'll say the truth out loud and still feel the weight of the lie. That's okay. The goal isn't to like flip a switch. That's not how these things work. The goal is to keep walking a new path, even when it feels awkward. It takes time and repetition to forge new paths. It takes time and repetition to forge new neural pathways. Give yourself grace. If you're the kind of person who thinks, I should be farther along by now, take a deep breath. Who told you that? That voice is part of the script too, that voice telling you should be farther along. You don't have to win the war in your head this week. You just have to resist one lie. You just have to walk one new path. That'd be a huge win. And don't do it alone. Maybe ask someone in your life this week, what's a lie that you're trying to unlearn? Or what's the truth that you're trying to believe? Community is where new stories grow. Don't try to do all 4 of these steps perfectly. Pick one, try it, mess it up, try again. That's how healing starts. So to wrap this all up, if your mind has been a battlefield lately, you're not failing. You're human. And you're waking up to the fact that spiritual growth includes mental healing. And if you've been pacing that trench for years, you're not weak. You're just tired. Jesus doesn't stand at the edge and say, climb faster. What's wrong with you? Why are you stuck down there? He steps into it with you and says, let's walk a new way, slowly together. The good news is you can't and you don't have to fix it all tonight. You just start with one thought, one pause, one prayer, and then another and another. This is how the mind is renewed. Not by trying harder, not by pretending, but by letting God speak gently and clearly into the trenches. So this week, pay attention to one thought, one trench, one logismoi, one small moment where you choose a new path. That's where renewal begins. That's what Lent is for. That's what desert seasons are for, not to punish you, but to pull you out of the noise in your head so you can hear again. So, for the anxious among us, may you know peace. For the shamed, may you know that you're loved. For the tired, may you know that you're not alone. And for all of us, may we keep walking the slow, honest road toward healing. Would you pray with me? God, your thoughts are not our thoughts, and your ways are not our ways, and I'm so grateful for that. God, thank you that that you want to speak the truth to us, that you want to transform us by the renewing of our minds. God, I pray that we would all wake up to the thought patterns that are holding us back from seeing the truth, the thought patterns that are lying to us. And God, I pray that you would begin to free us from those as we become aware of them. God, may we be a community that helps one another in this process of renewing our minds, in this process of being freed from the lies that we tell ourselves to hear the truth of your voice. God, we love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.